They dragged her through the dust at dawn, the ropes biting into her wrists, the jeers of her own people ringing louder than the crows. Nahima did not fight. She did not beg. Her face, bruised, bloodied, half hidden by strands of black hair, was turned toward the mountains where he lived, the one they said had poisoned her heart. "You shamed the blood," the elders spat as they cast her before the council fire. "You lay with a white man, a mountain man. You forgot who you were." Nahima's chest heaved, but her voice, though trembling, did not break. "I did not forget," she said. "I chose." The strike came swift and merciless, a whip woven from rawhide and rage. The first lash split her shoulder, the second painted fire across her spine. By the fifth, she no longer felt her body. By the 10th, she no longer heard their words. Only his name echoed in her mind. Silas. The man with the quiet hands and storm-gray eyes. The man who had taught her that love was not a cage but a home. Somewhere beyond the circle of torches, a rider watched from the ridge. Silas had come despite the warnings, despite the threat of death if he crossed into Apache land again. He had not slept since they'd taken her. He had not breathed without tasting her name. And now, watching the woman he loved beaten for the sin of loving him, something inside him snapped like brittle pine in a winter fire. "Enough!" His voice thundered through the clearing as he strode from the shadows, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes blazing with the fury of a man who had lost everything once and would not do it again. Warriors moved to block his path, but the elder raised a hand. "This is not your land," the old man hissed. "Then I will die on it," Silas answered, "but I will not watch you kill the only light that's ever reached me." Nahima lifted her head, blood painting her lips, and for the first time in days their eyes met. "Why did you come?" she whispered. Silas dropped to one knee beside her, his hand hovering just above her broken skin. "Because you once taught me love was worth everything," he murmured, voice breaking. "And I came to tell you it still is." A hush fell over the circle. Even the flames seemed to bend toward them, a man and a woman, beaten but unbowed, daring to choose each other in a world that said they could not. They did not kill him that morning, though many wanted to. The elder's voice cut through the rising anger, calm but sharp as obsidian. "Let them both live," he declared. "Exile is a slower death." And just like that, Nahima's fate was sealed. They cast her out beyond the cedar line with nothing but the clothes on her back and the blood still drying on her skin. Silas walked beside her in silence, his rifle slung over one shoulder, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack stone. Every few steps he looked at her as if afraid she might vanish, but she did not look back. Her pride wouldn't let her. "You shouldn't have come," she said at last, voice hoarse. "They would have stopped before killing me." "And if they hadn't?" he asked. "If the woman I love had died thinking she was alone?" Nahima stumbled, the memory of the lashes still raw. "Love isn't enough, Silas. Not here. Not between us." He stopped walking. "Then tell me you don't love me, and I'll turn around right now." The wind swept between them, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. She wanted to say the words. She wanted to free him from the ruin that followed her. But she couldn't. "I can't," she whispered. Silas stepped closer, his rough hand cupping the side of her bruised face with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "Then love is enough, and it's worth every scar." They found shelter that night in the hollow of a sandstone bluff, a fire struggling against the wind. Nahima sat close to the flames, knees drawn to her chest, while Silas cleaned the blood from her back with water from his canteen. He did not speak while he worked. He did not ask her to stay or forgive or forget. He only tended to her wounds like a prayer. "I thought I knew pain," she murmured, watching the sparks rise into the dark. "But this is different. Because it's not just yours," he said quietly. "It's ours now." Nahima turned to look at him, really look, and saw the shadows behind his eyes. He had his scars too. A brother lost to the war, a family that had turned their backs when he traded their hate for her love. They were two people the world had tried to break, and somehow they had found each other in the wreckage. As the fire burned lower, Nahima let her head rest against his shoulder, her heartbeat slowing to match his. She did not know what lay beyond the horizon, exile, hunger, more hate. But for now, beneath the desert stars, love was still alive. And that, she thought, was enough to keep walking. They walked for 3 days without a map, following the river south where the cottonwoods bent low over the water and the wind carried no memory of hatred. Nahima's back burned beneath the crusted wounds, but she refused to slow down. Every step away from her people felt like a betrayal, and yet every step beside Silas felt like the first breath of a life she'd never known she could have. On the second night, they camped near a canyon where the red rock glowed under the setting sun. Silas gathered wood while Nahima ground herbs she'd gathered into a paste, the ancient medicine of her mother's hands. When she spread it over her lashes, the sting was sharp, but the warmth that followed was deeper. "You shouldn't have to heal me," she said. "It's not your burden." "It is if I love you," he replied without looking up. "That's how love works. We carry the weight together." She studied him by firelight, the scars that ran along his forearms, the jagged line under his jaw where a blade had once kissed too close. "And who heals you?" she asked softly. "You already are," he murmured. They shared dried venison in silence, broken only by the hum of crickets and the river's song. When the fire sank to embers, Nahima found herself telling him stories of the summers she spent chasing wild horses across the mesa, of the time her grandmother taught her the meaning of forgiveness, of the name she'd been given at birth. Nahima, she who walks between worlds. Silas listened without interruption, his eyes fixed on her like a man memorizing the sound of rain after years of drought. "You don't belong between worlds," he said when she finished. "You are the world." Her throat tightened. "Then why does it feel like every door's closed?" He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "Because we're not meant to knock," he said. "We're meant to build our own." On the third morning, as they climbed a ridge overlooking the valley below, Nahima stopped. Smoke rose in the distance, a settlement maybe, or a military outpost, safety or danger, she didn't know which. "What if they hate us too?" she whispered. Silas's arms slipped around her waist, steady and unshakable. "Then we keep walking until we find a place that doesn't." She leaned into him, the wind lifting her hair, the horizon stretching endless and unknown. Ahead lay exile, hardship, and the ghosts of two broken worlds. But somewhere beyond all of that, there was a chance, small, fragile, but real, that love could become a home. They reached the town of Coldwater on the 5th day, their bodies worn and their spirits stretched thin. It was a mining settlement on the edge of nowhere, a place where strangers came to disappear and stayed because no one cared enough to ask their names. Dust swirled down the main street as they walked, every face turning toward them. Nahima felt the weight of their stares like stones against her skin, the scorn for her braids and beaded leggings, the suspicion in the way hands hovered near holsters when they saw Silas's rifle, the disgust when they realized their fingers were intertwined. "Keep walking," Silas murmured under his breath, eyes forward, but the whispers followed them anyway. Apache girl, savage, traitor, white lover. At the end of the street, outside the small trading post, a group of men stood blocking the door. One of them, tall, sunburned, with a badge pinned crooked on his chest, spat into the dust. "We don't serve her kind here," he said. Silas's jaw tightened. "Then you don't serve me either." The man's eyes narrowed. "We don't want trouble." "Then step aside," Silas said, "because trouble's what you'll have if you lay a hand on her." The silence stretched long and dangerous, the kind that smells of gunpowder and blood. Finally the man laughed, a short, ugly sound, and jerked his chin toward the open prairie. "There's an old shack west of town. You want to rot together, do it there, but don't expect a welcome." They left without buying a thing. The shack was little more than a collapsed roof and rotting boards, but they patched it with scavenged lumber and made a fire in the stone hearth. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, a fragile claim in a land that wanted them gone. That night, Nahima sat by the fire, staring into the flames with a heaviness that words couldn't reach. "Maybe they're right," she said quietly. "Maybe loving you is a mistake." Silas froze, the knife in his hand stilling mid-whittle. "Do you believe that?" She swallowed hard. "I don't know anymore." He set the knife down and came to sit beside her, his voice low but steady. "They want you to believe that, because if you do, they win. But I'm not asking you to love me for them. I'm asking you to love me again, for us." Her eyes burned, and for the first time since the lashes, tears fell freely. I don't know if I can. Then let me prove you can, he whispered, every day, every breath, until you remember. And for the first time in a long time, Nahima didn't pull away. Days turned into weeks, and the town's hatred settled into something colder: indifference. People no longer shouted when they saw them on the street. They simply turned away, as if by pretending Nahima and Silas didn't exist, they could erase the discomfort their love brought. And yet, in that quiet rejection, something else took root. The river that wound behind the shack became their refuge, a narrow ribbon of water cutting through the desert like a promise that life would always find a way. Nahima went there every morning, sitting barefoot on the rocks, letting the current lick gently at her ankles. It was the only place she could think clearly. "You're talking to the water again," Silas teased one afternoon as he dropped beside her, a basket of foraged berries in hand. "The water listens better than people," she replied. "It doesn't judge. What's it saying today?" "That nothing stays broken forever. Even stone is shaped by something softer." Silas smiled faintly, watching her fingers trace patterns in the current. "You believe that?" She hesitated, eyes drifting to the scars that still crossed her skin. "I want to." "Then let me help you." "You already have." "Not enough," he said. "I want to be more than the man who pulled you from the ashes. I want to be the man who shows you there's still a life beyond the burn." Nahima looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, the shame in her chest loosened its grip. "You already are." They sat there until the sun dipped low and the water turned to gold, speaking of things they had never dared dream aloud: a small field for planting corn, a horse to carry them to the next valley, children who might grow up free of the hatred that had scarred them. "Do you ever wish we'd never met?" she asked suddenly. Silas's jaw tightened. "Every day." Her heart dropped. "Oh." "Every day," he repeated. "I wish I'd never met you in a world that hates this much, but I thank God every day that I met you anyway." Tears pricked Nahima's eyes, but they were not born of sorrow this time. They were the kind that came when a heart too long buried in pain finally felt sunlight. The river hummed around them, carrying their words downstream like blessings whispered to the earth. And for the first time since the lashes fell, Nahima believed that love, fragile, stubborn, defiant love, might truly be stronger than the hate that tried to crush it. It would take time. It would take forgiveness. But the river had spoken, and she was ready to listen. The peace they had built by the river did not last. Hatred, like drought, always found a way back. It was late summer when the riders came, 4 of them, faces painted for war, horses kicking up red dust as they approached. Nahima knew them before they spoke. Cousins, childhood friends, men who had shared her fires as a girl and now came with hatred in their eyes. Silas stepped out of the shack first, rifle across his shoulder, but she laid a hand gently on his arm. "No guns," she whispered. "This is my fight." The leader, Tahoma, the one who had once carved her a bone pendant when they were 12, dismounted with a sneer. "So it's true," he spat. "The daughter of our people sleeps beside the enemy." "I sleep beside the man I love," Nahima said evenly, "and I regret nothing." Tahoma's eyes flashed. "You shame us all. The elders gave you mercy, and this is how you repay them." "Mercy," she hissed. "Mercy would have been letting me live my truth without the taste of blood in my mouth." One of the younger men raised his rifle, but Tahoma held out a hand. "We're not here to kill you. We're here to bring you home. Your father is dying. He calls for you." The words hit her harder than any blow. Her father, proud, unbending, the man whose silence had cut deeper than any lash, calling for her. "Why?" she whispered. "Because even a dying man must see the ruin his daughter has brought." Silas stepped forward then, his voice a quiet storm. "If she goes, it's her choice. But understand this, she doesn't crawl, she doesn't beg. And if you lay one finger on her, I will burn the sky to bring her back." Tahoma's glare slid to him. "You have no say in our blood." "She is my blood," Silas said simply, and Nahima felt her heart fracture and mend in the same breath. The riders exchanged glances. "Tomorrow at dawn," Tahoma said. "We wait by the cedar grove. Come or stay forgotten." They turned and rode off, leaving silence and dust in their wake. Nahima stared after them until they disappeared into the horizon. "If you go," Silas said quietly, "I'll go with you." She shook her head. "No, this is a path I must walk alone. Then I'll follow as close as I can." The fire crackled behind them, casting long shadows across the dirt, and for the first time since the beating, Nahima wasn't sure which terrified her more, facing the people who had broken her or facing the pieces of herself she had left behind. The cedar grove was quiet at dawn, the air heavy with the scent of sap and dust. Nahima stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart hammering against her ribs. Silas had followed her as far as the ridge, watching from a distance as she stepped into the past alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, elders, warriors, and finally an old man leaning heavily on a carved walking stick. Her father. His hair, once black as obsidian, was now streaked with silver, his frame smaller than she remembered. But his eyes were the same, hard, unforgiving. "You came," he rasped. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," she admitted, "but you asked for me." He nodded, coughing into his fist before speaking again. "A man has a right to look into the eyes of the child who destroyed his name." The words stung, but she didn't flinch. "I did not destroy anything. I only chose love." "With him?" He spat the word like poison. "A man who took our land, who slaughtered our sons." Nahima's voice trembled, but she held his gaze. "Not him, Silas. A man who held me when I was broken, who sees me as more than blood or duty." Her father's eyes narrowed. "And yet you return." "I came because you are my father," she said softly, "and because part of me still wanted to believe you could forgive me." The silence stretched between them, old wounds widening in the space of it. Finally, he spoke. "I watched them beat you that day," he said quietly. "I watched and said nothing. Do you know why? Because you hated me." "No," he whispered, and his voice cracked like brittle wood. "Because I hated myself for raising a daughter brave enough to do what I never could." Nahima's breath caught. "Then why condemn me?" "Because I feared the world would crush you for it. And I was right." His legs gave out then, and she was at his side before he hit the ground. He smelled of cedar smoke and memory, and as she held him, he wept, not for shame, but for the years lost to silence. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he choked. "Then I will give it freely," she whispered, "because I need it too." When she stepped back from the grove, Silas was waiting at the edge of the trees. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. He saw it in her eyes. The weight she had carried for so long had begun at last to lift. And as the sun rose over the horizon, she knew the fire that had burned everything she was had also forged who she had become. They returned to the shack by the river in silence, the morning light chasing long shadows over the valley. Nahima's father's words echoed inside her chest, strange and heavy, part blessing, part wound. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't a clean thing. It didn't erase what had been done. It simply gave the past permission to stop hurting quite so much. Silas was already boiling water when she stepped inside, his eyes searching her face for answers. "Did you find what you needed?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think I found what I was afraid to see." "Which is?" She sank down beside the fire, wrapping her arms around her knees. "That I am not broken because of what they did. I was broken because I believed them when they said I was." Silas knelt beside her, his hand brushing gently over the scars on her back. "Then maybe it's time we stop calling them scars. What would we call them instead?" "Names," he said. "Proof that you survived, proof that you're stronger than they ever were." Nahima's breath caught. Names, she let the word linger in her mouth, rolling it gently like a prayer. "Then I will name this one Courage," she whispered, tracing a long, jagged line on her shoulder. "And this one, Defiance, and this one," she touched the mark low on her spine. "This one, Love." Silas's eyes softened, and the ones no one can see. "Hope," she said, "and forgiveness, and you," his hands stilled, "me. You are part of the story now, too. Every wound I carry led me here, to you, to this life, to the chance to love without shame." Silence fell, but it was the good kind, the kind that felt like two heartbeats finding rhythm together. You once asked me to love you again, she said, her voice barely above a breath. I think I finally understand how. How? Not as the girl who was beaten for loving you, but as the woman who chooses you, knowing what it cost. He took her hand then, calloused and warm, and pressed it to his chest. Then I choose you too, not as someone to protect, but as someone to walk beside. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wildflowers down the valley, and for the first time, Nahima didn't feel like she was standing between worlds. She felt like she was building one. And as the firelight danced across the scars she had renamed, she realized they were no longer reminders of her pain. They were the map of how she had found her way home. Autumn crept gently into Coldwater, painting the cottonwoods gold and scattering the riverbanks with fallen leaves. The townsfolk still looked away when Nahima and Silas passed, but the looks felt different now, less like hatred, more like uncertainty. A few even nodded as they walked by, awkward and fleeting, but enough to hint that the world was shifting, one heartbeat at a time. It began with small things. A widow named Mrs. Carter left a basket of cornmeal on their doorstep. A ranch hand brought a sack of seed, muttering something about neighbors helping neighbors. Children followed Nahima when she gathered water by the river, curious about the woman with the dark braids and the soft voice who told stories of thunderbirds and sacred rivers. Silas built a larger shelter beside the shack, hammering each board with a care he'd never known before. "We're not leaving?" Nahima asked one evening as the last light slipped over the ridge. "Not anymore," he said. "This place has been a wound long enough. It's time it became a home." That night, they invited the children who watched from a distance to sit by their fire. At first, they stayed close to the edge of the clearing, wary and unsure, but Nahima's voice drew them closer. She told them stories of her people, of the coyote who brought fire to mankind, of the eagle who taught warriors to be gentle. Silas cooked beans and bread on the flames, and when the night grew cold, they handed out blankets stitched from scraps. "Do you see them?" Nahima whispered as the children drifted into sleep around the fire. "The ones who stayed?" Silas smiled. "It's always the brave ones who stay." The next week, a trader stopped by with flour and salt. The week after that, a farmer offered lumber for a corral. None of them spoke of what they once said or believed. They didn't apologize, but they stayed. And that, Nahima thought, was apology enough. One evening, as the river swelled with the last rain of autumn, Silas turned to her with a quiet question. "What do you want now?" Nahima thought for a long time before answering. "A garden," she said softly. "A place to plant roots, a place where children who were never meant to belong can find a family." He kissed her forehead, his breath warm against her skin. "Then that's what we'll build." And in that moment, surrounded by the first small pieces of a life they had once believed impossible, Nahima understood something she never had before. Love was not a rebellion, it was a seed, and seeds always grew where someone was willing to stay. The first snow of winter fell soft and silent over Coldwater, dusting the cabin roof in white and turning the river into a ribbon of silver beneath the moon. Nahima stood by the doorway wrapped in a blanket, watching the flakes swirl in the firelight. The land around her, once foreign, once hostile, now felt like something sacred. It wasn't because the town had changed, it was because she had. Silas came up behind her, his arms circling her waist, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. "You're quiet," he murmured. "I'm thinking," she whispered. "About what?" "About how far we've come, about the girl who believed she was ruined and the woman who stands here now." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love both of them." She turned in his arms to face him, searching his eyes. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me after they beat me?" "Every word." "Say it again." His voice was softer this time, but it carried the same trembling truth it had that day beneath the council fire. "Love me again." Her breath hitched. "And if I say I already do?" "Then say it louder." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling freely now, not from pain, but from the overwhelming weight of all they had survived. "I love you," she said, voice breaking. "I love you for standing in the fire with me. I love you for every scar, every silence, every breath you refused to give up." Silas smiled, a smile that held every mile they had walked and every battle they had fought. "And I love you," he said, "for never letting go, for teaching me that love isn't something we find, it's something we build. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying away the last echoes of the past. Inside, the fire burned bright and steady, the same fire that had once warmed two broken souls hiding from the world, and now lit the home they had built together. Later that night, they planted a cedar sapling near the riverbank, its roots already stretching deep into the frozen earth. For the future, Nahima said, for the children who will come. For love, Silas added, for everything that tried to destroy it and failed. They stood hand in hand beneath the falling snow, their breath mingling in the cold air, their hearts beating in quiet harmony. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Nahima realized the words had become more than a plea. Love me again was no longer a request. It was a promise. A promise to choose each other again and again, no matter the scars, no matter the storms. A promise to keep building, to keep healing, to keep loving. And in that frozen valley where pain had once lived, love finally did, fierce, unbreakable, and free. Please like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable Western tales here on Redemption West. If love cost you everything, would you choose it again? Tell us in the comments.